Listen up, y'all. If y'all love true crime stories from murders, cold cases, missing people, or just crazy stories that will have you just shaking your head, subscribe to patreon.com/celebrity underrated for exclusive content to get those type of stories. That's patreon.com/celebrity underrated, or just click the link in the description. You know, here's a story that y'all have asked me to redo and make longer, which is the Jackie Wilson story. You know, I remember hearing a song called To Be Loved by Jackie Wilson in the classic movie called Coming to America, when Hakeem finally hooked up with Lisa McDowell. Jackie Wilson's nickname was Mr. Excitement, and has inspired so many artists like Teddy Pendergrass, who went to see him perform as a kid and was amazed how the women in the audience would just go crazy for him when he was on stage. Michael Jackson paid tribute to him at the 1984 Grammy Awards and dedicated his album of the year Grammy for Thriller to him for inspiring him. Van Morrison, James Brown, Elvis Presley, and a bunch of other musicians said he inspired them. Look, Elvis Presley called himself the white Jackie Wilson, and Jackie Wilson called himself the black Elvis Presley. They became real good friends. I mean, what can you say? Jackie Wilson had it all, from dance moves, the good looks, the fashion style. He could sing 4 octaves. He could fight. The man was amazing and make women pass out and throw their panties and bras on stage. The women would try to rip his clothes off every night on stage. He was one of the first artists to have women throw their panties on stage, and they would try to rip his clothes off. He was like the first black megastar alongside Sam Cooke. Some call him the king of rock and roll. Over 50 hit singles in the R&B, pop, soul, doo-wop, and easy listening genres. 16 top 10 R&B hits, with 6 of them hitting number 1, 14 top 20 pop hits on the Billboard Hot 100, and 6 of them reaching the top 10. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And some say he was killed because he was dealing with a record company that was mob affiliated. So let's get into the story, y'all. Now, Jackie Leroy Wilson Jr. was born on June 9th, 1934 in Detroit, Michigan. And he was the only surviving child from his parents because his mother had actually lost 2 children before she had him. Now, his father was a real bad alcoholic. And when Jackie was about 6 years old, he used to have Jackie on the corner singing with him to make some money to buy more wine. In which later on had Jackie was doing the same thing at the age of 9 years old, standing on the corner drinking cheap wine. Wow, Jackie was drinking alcohol at the age of 9 years old, y'all. But where Jackie was from, now see, his neighborhood produced a bunch of future stars too, like Aretha Franklin, Smokey Robinson, and many more. Him and Smokey Robinson were in kindergarten together, and he was a class clown throughout his school days. He was always in trouble, but Jackie said he never liked school and he started skipping a lot. Now, growing up, some of his musical influences were the Ink Spots, Mahalia Jackson, Nat King Cole, and many more artists who was out at that time. And he loved singing in church. They say he loved singing very loud. Now, by the age of 10 years old, he had met his first wife named Frida Hood. She was 11 years old at the time, and he started boxing also around that time because Jackie really wanted to be a boxer. His idol was Joe Louis. Around the age of 12 years old, he formed a gospel group called the Ever Ready Gospel Singers. And they became very popular locally, and they were getting paid too. They was making money. Jackie would get paid from all the churches after singing and then go shoot dice with the money, y'all. But he also ended up meeting Sam Cooke, who was with this gospel group called the Soul Stirrers at that time too. Now, also around that time, Jackie had joined a gang called the Shakers, which was known as one of the most feared gangs in Detroit, and people were scared to death of them. Otis Williams from the group The Temptations said the leader of the Shakers gang was frightening. He was a gangster for real. But Jackie used to roll with the gang, and they looked out for him because they knew someday he was going to be a big star. Now, by the time he turned 15 years old, he ended up dropping out of high school in the 9th grade, and he ended up getting into some trouble, which landed him in juvenile detention. And it was there where he really focused on becoming a boxer. So when he was released from juvenile detention, he entered the Detroit Golden Gloves amateur circuit at the age of 16 years old. He actually lied and told them he was 18 years old because you had to be 18 years old to join, but he was only 16 years old at the time. And Jackie said he did win the welterweight title and turn pro, but his mother forced him to quit boxing after he was knocked out in the 4th round in the last fight. His mother didn't want nobody to mess up his face. Plus, his father also didn't want him in the boxing thing either, because he knew the mobsters and the gangsters controlled the boxing industry, and he didn't want Jackie in that business. But his boxing career record was 2-8. He won 2, lost 8 fights, and he decided to quit. So after that, he was forced to marry his future wife, Frida Hood, by her father after getting her pregnant. And he became a father at the age of 17 years old. Now, they say Jackie was a player though when it came to the women, and he had got over 14 girls pregnant in his neighborhood. Wow, that's crazy. The girls couldn't resist his good looks and singing talent, which led to him getting stabbed too around that time. He was stabbed up by a woman, in which some say was a prostitute, due to the fact that the way Jackie treated her. Jackie had a bad temper on him too. So now with a kid and to support his wife and new child, he ended up getting a job at the Ford plant. But he quit that job a few weeks later because he said it hurt his hands. So that's when he decided to just focus on music. And he formed another group called the Falcons, which included his cousin Levi Stubbs, who y'all know will later on join the Four Tops, and his cousin Joe Stubbs, Levi's brother, who later on went to form the Contours, and Hubert Johnson. Now, after that group, he ended up meeting Johnny Otis at a talent show, who put him in a group called the Thrillers, which consisted of Sonny Woods and Hank Ballard. Hank Ballard Hank Ballard will later on form the Royals, and then Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. And Johnny Otis also discovered a lot of artists that became popular, like Etta James. He found Etta James when she was about 13 years old, T-Bone Walker, Little Willie John, and many more. But after that didn't work out, he ended up signing with Dizzy Gillespie's record label called DG Records. And he was going by his nickname, Sonny Wilson. That was his nickname, Sonny. But then, in 1953, he joined the Dominoes after singer Clyde McPhatter left the Dominoes and formed the Drifters. Clyde McPhatter is the one that Jackie emulated his style and his voice after. He really admired Clyde McPhatter. And Clyde McPhatter helped Jackie out a lot. Now the lead singer of Billy Ward and his Dominoes, Jackie used to have the crowds going crazy, especially the ladies, every time he would drop to his knees and do his moves. And it was also around that time that DJ Alan Freed gave him the nickname Mr. Excitement. Even Elvis Presley went to hear Jackie Wilson and the Dominoes perform in Las Vegas around that time. And Elvis was so impressed with Jackie's singing after hearing him doing the cover of his #1 hit song called Don't Be Cruel. Now, Elvis liked Jackie's cover of Don't Be Cruel so much, he started to introduce the song by saying how Jackie sang it much better and would do it in impersonation of the slower version Jackie and the Dominoes would do. But then Jackie ended up having his tonsils removed after he got tonsillitis, but that didn't affect his singing voice though. And around that time he just became more popular, which made Billy Ward, who was the leader of the Dominoes, a little jealous. But he knew in his heart that Jackie was just a star in the making and he needed to go solo. So after Jackie left the Dominoes, he ended up meeting his manager named Al Green, who at the time was managing other artists like Johnny Ray, Della Reese, and Laverne Baker. And he got Jackie a record deal with Brunswick Records. Now, Al Green also had just connected with Berry Gordy, who at the time was an up-and-coming songwriter trying to get in the music industry. So, now signed to Brunswick Records, Jackie hit the studio to record for his debut album. But then his manager, Al Green, just all of a sudden dies from a heart attack. And that's when Nat Turnerpole took over and became his manager because he was handling all the publishing for Al Green's company. Now, when it comes to Nat Turnerpole, y'all, he was connected to gangster mogul Morris Levy, who ran Roulette Records, but we will get into that a little bit later. And on September 8th, 1957, Jackie released his first single titled Reet Petite, which was written by Berry Gordy, Billy Davis, and Gwen Gordy. And that song hit number 62 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 6 on the UK singles chart. Now, Berry Gordy also wrote his next single titled To Be Loved, and which is one of my favorite songs from Jackie Wilson, probably because of the classic movie Coming to America starring Eddie Murphy. But the song To Be Loved hit number 3 on the R&B charts and became his first gold-selling single. Then he released some more songs like I'm Wandering, We Have Love, and That's Why I Love You So, which hit number 2 on the US R&B chart and number 13 on the US pop chart. But then he released a song that would take the world by storm called Lonely Teardrops, which hit number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. Plus, it sold over 1 million copies. And when he appeared on American Bandstand, that just took his fame to another level. Plus, he performed in the Alan Freed movie called Go Johnny Go. Another big song called I'll Be Satisfied hit number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was a top 10 R&B hit, hitting number 6 on the charts. But the sad part is this, y'all. Berry Gordy hardly got paid for writing all those hits for Jackie. And when he confronted Nat Turnerpole and Jackie about the money, they told Berry they didn't need him and they can find other songwriters. And that's when Berry left, borrowed $800 from his family, and started the Motown empire, and the rest is history. After that, Jackie released a song called You Better Know It, which hit number 1 on the R&B charts. Now, also around that time, he had met Sam Cooke again, but this time they were both dominating the charts. And they became real good friends and would tour together. Jackie was actually with Sam Cooke when he created the song called Chain Gang, because they saw black guys shackled and chained up walking along the road in Georgia somewhere. Now, in 1960, Jackie signed a new contract with Brunswick Records for $1 million, making him the highest paid musician behind Elvis Presley at that time. But, tragedy would strike early that year when his good friend, singer Jesse Belvin, would die in a suspicious car accident. Now, the story goes on February 6, 1960, Jesse Belvin, Jackie Wilson, and Marv Johnson had did a show in Little Rock, Arkansas, which would be the first concert show ever played with an integrated audience in Little Rock's history. And the show got kind of crazy and wild to the point they had to rush out of town after being threatened by the racist mob at gunpoint. And they suspected that the racist mob had done something to Jesse Belvin's car because somebody had also slashed Jackie's Cadillac tires too that night. But Jesse Belvin and his driver ended up being killed in that accident. Jesse Belvin basically was decapitated in that car accident. But his wife Joanne was still alive. She had a crushed pelvis, crushed chest, and a broken arm. But the doctors wouldn't help her because at the time, at that time, the hospitals were racist too. But once Jackie found out that she was still alive, he went back to Arkansas to pay the doctors, but it was just too late and she died from her injuries. And Jackie was so hurt, man. He was so hurt. He was supposed to sing at their funerals, but he was so hurt he couldn't even make a sound on the microphone. He was just torn up behind their deaths. And you can check out the Jesse Belvin story I did on this channel when y'all get a chance too. It's a great story, the Jesse Belvin story. But after that, Jackie continued to release more big hits like Talk That Talk, which hit number 3 on the R&B charts and number 34 on pop charts. Another song I love was called Doggin' Around. I love that song, Doggin' Around. And that song hit number 1 on the Hot R&B Sides chart for 3 weeks and number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100. Now, right after that, he released a single titled A Woman, A Lover, A Friend, which hit number 1 on the R&B charts, and Otis Redding would do a cover version of it in 1964. Another song called Night hit number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and sold over 1 million copies. But then, that same year, in 1960, he was arrested and charged with assaulting a police officer when fans tried to climb on stage in New Orleans. He assaulted a policeman who had shoved one of the fans. They say Jackie had jumped into the crowd of the policeman to save one of his friends and beat one of the cops up real bad because, Jackie used to box. Jackie had them hands, but once he beat that cop up, that's when more cops beat Jackie and nearly killed him. And he had to be rushed to the hospital. But that 1960 year was great for Jackie, though. He was voted Entertainer of the Year by Cashbox magazine. Now, the following year, on February 15th, 1961, Jackie Wilson was shot by his girlfriend named Juanita Jones. Now, there's a lot of stories about what happened that day, which was on Valentine's Day in Manhattan, New York. Now, one story goes, he was coming back from a show and Juanita Jones was sitting by his door waiting for him. And he just ignored her, and that's when she pulled out a gun and he tried to grab it, and he ended up getting shot in the stomach and his thigh. Another story is Jackie told the media that she was a crazy stalker and she was about to kill herself, and he tried to stop her and got shot himself in the tussle. Another story goes, his ex-wife, Harlene Harris, who he was seeing on the side at the time because, he was married to Frida. Harlene was coming to visit him in his New York apartment, and she was attacked by a crazy fan, and Jackie intervened and was shot twice. They say Juanita Jones was actually trying to shoot Harlene Harris. But whatever the real story is, at the end of the day, Jackie was shot twice, and the doctor couldn't remove the bullet that entered his stomach and ended up in his back. So the bullet is in his spine for life. Plus he had lost a kidney too. But a lot of people say after the shooting incident, after Jackie got shot, Jackie had changed. He kind of lost his spark. Even James Brown said it in this book that Jackie started to drink, do drugs, and party more, and turn wild and crazy after he got shot. He said it got to the point that they had to lock him in the dressing room until he calmed down when he saw him at a show. Wow. It was wild. And after you get shot, it does something to you though. And some close friends of Jackie's confirmed that He did love to smoke weed. He say Jackie loved to smoke weed, and he did have a crazy coke habit where they had to lock him in a room until he cooled out. And it all started to happen after he got shot. That's when he started to get out of control. He also played in a movie called Teenage Millionaire that year too. Now, after that, in March 1962, he released a single called Baby Workout, which hit #1 on the R&B charts and #5 on the pop charts. Also that same year, in 1962, singer Etta James said Jackie had beat up her boyfriend during an altercation. She said Jackie's hands were like lethal weapons. Wow, I told y'all. They say Jackie always was fighting on the road because the men used to get so jealous of him because after every show, Jackie would kiss all the women fans. They say he would French kiss and tongue all the women fans. Wow, that's crazy. Dangerous too. And look, the men would get mad and would take it out on the women. And once Jackie saw that, he would beat the men up. He loved to fight if you made him mad. He once had a boxing career, y'all, so don't forget it. He would also fight as road managers and bodyguards too. But it got so crazy with the women that one time in Atlanta, a 21-year-old white woman who was a former Playboy bunny, but at the time she was a waitress, she was up in Jackie's dressing room seeing him, and her husband came back there looking for her. And she tried to run away, but as soon as she hit the parking lot, her husband shot her 5 times in her back and killed her. Wow. And in court, the husband stated that he shot his wife because she became infatuated with Jackie Wilson. Wow. That's crazy. But Jackie was also very generous too. He was a generous person, and he helped out a lot of people who needed money. They say one time he gave out over $20,000 worth of jewelry to a crowd in Boston to help students. He gave away a lot of his suits to people and would at least hand out $1,000 to $1,500 a day. Like I said earlier, him and Etta James were good friends. And when James Brown tried to fire her from his tour because she was late bringing him something back from the store, Jackie stood up for her and told James Brown if Etta James leaves, he was not going to perform with him. And James Brown changed his mind quick too. When promoters try to cheat Etta James out of money when they did shows together, Jackie would pay her out of his pocket. They were good friends. Now, the year 1964 was kind of crazy for Jackie. First off, while performing at a show in St. Louis, he had got word that the cops were there to arrest him for not fulfilling a contract for another promoter who had sued him for $2,200. So to escape that whole situation, he jumped from a second floor window, but eventually he was caught by the police and spent a day in jail, but later on posted a $3,000 bond. Now, also that same year is when the famous incident happened. I'm talking about when Jackie Wilson was hung out of a window at a hotel by his feet. Just like in the movie, the 5 Heartbeats movie, when Big Red did it to one of his artists. And I first heard that in an interview from the R&B group The Dells, because the movie is based on their careers. And they told Robert Townsend that story. That's why he put it in the movie. Now, some of Jackie's close friends confirmed the story and said it may have happened more than once to him. Wow. And the reason it happened is because Jackie wouldn't sign a new contract with Nat Turner Pole because a lot of other record labels wanted to sign Jackie. Now, Jackie's cousin named Billy Davis said he had went to see Jackie after the incident, and he said Jackie was white as a ghost, and he asked him what was wrong, and that's when Jackie told him what had happened. I told you his manager, Nat Turner Pole, was affiliated with Morris Levy. At the time, the entertainment business was run by the mob. Quincy Jones and Clarence Avant said that Nat Turner Pole was getting extorted by the mob himself. That's why he was acting like that. But Even Eugene Record, who was the lead singer of the Chi-Lites, said he was assaulted by Nat Turner and his crew when he was signed to Brunswick Records over some royalties. Now, also that same year, on December 11th, 1964, Jackie's good friend Sam Cooke was shot and killed. Now, another crazy story that happened around that time in the 60s, somewhere early 60s, is the time about Patti LaBelle, who said Jackie tried to rape her. Now, according to Patti LaBelle's book, she said she was backstage at a theater all alone at the time, and Jackie came up behind her and started kissing her on her neck. And she could smell the liquor on his breath. And she started to free herself, but that's when one of Jackie's friends started dragging her backwards, and she was kicking with all her might, but she was no match for him. Then they locked her in a room, and Jackie started touching on her, and she started screaming, but no one could hear her. And she said she didn't have a knife, but she had her voice, and she started screaming even louder at the top of her lungs. And she said she can scream every bit as loud as she can sing. And by her screaming loud, suddenly they backed off and they let her go. And she ran as fast as she could in the direction of the lights. Wow. And Gladys Knight didn't deny the accuracy of Patti LaBelle's story, but she remembers Jackie Wilson as a perfect gentleman who always went out of his way to help Gladys Knight and the Pips in the group's early days. Now, in 1965, Jackie and his wife Frida ended up getting divorced after she found out about all the women he had been with. She had had enough. And they were married for 14 years and had 4 kids together. Plus, around that time, Jackie found out that he owed over $300,000 in taxes, in which he thought Nat Turner was taking care of his business expenses. And the IRS was about to take his house that his wife Frida and his 4 kids lived in. In 1966, Jackie Wilson was arrested for inciting a riot and refusing to obey a police order at a nightclub in Port Arthur, Texas, in which he was later convicted of drunkenness and fined $30. In March 1967, Jackie and his drummer, Jimmy Smith, were arrested in South Carolina on morals charges after they were entertaining 2 24-year-old white women in their motel room. Then he was arrested for possession of heroin, hypodermic needles, and 2 loaded shotguns. But right after that, a couple months later, he released a single titled "Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher," which hit number 1 on the US Billboard R&B chart and number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Plus, it sold over 2 million copies. The production on that song was played by former members of the Motown Records house band called the Funk Brothers. And look, Maurice White, who later on would join Earth, Wind & Fire, played the drums, y'all. Wow. And you know what else? That song was originally recorded by the Dells, but they never released it. But after that song became successful and the album Higher and Higher also sold well, that's when Jackie and Nat Turner started to really fall out over money. And it got to the point where he refused to record for Brunswick Records, but he was still under contract with them. So, when he would do a show, Jackie would even have to send the show money to Nat Turner. Wow. He was stealing a lot of money from Jackie, y'all, and even put his son's name on Jackie's publishing so he would have money in the future. Wow. The same thing P. Diddy did to the Locks and everybody, y'all. Put the publishing in their kids' names so they can eat forever. It's crazy. But that same year, in 1967, he married his second wife, model Harlene Harris, in which his manager Nat Turner made him do. Nat Turner made him marry her to clean up his image for the public because of that incident in South Carolina when he was arrested on morals charges being with them white girls in a motel room. But, in 1969, Jackie and Harleen ended up separated because Jackie found out that Harleen was having an affair with his manager, Nat Turnipole. He actually caught them in bed together, and he never saw Harleen or their son again after the breakup. Now, in 1970, Jackie's oldest son, his 16-year-old son, Jackie Jr., was shot and killed on a neighbor's porch near their Detroit house. They say apparently his son, Jackie Jr., had got into it with a neighbor and he was shot in his back from a shotgun. Wow, that's sad, man. And Jackie took the passing of his son very hard. He took that passing very hard, to the point that he really turned to drugs and alcohol even more, because he just couldn't cope with his son's death. In 1975, Nat Turnipole and 18 other Brunswick executives were indicted on federal charges of mail fraud and tax evasion stemming from bribery and payola scandal. Now, it's reported that Nat Turnipole, along with Clive Davis, Kenny Gamble, y'all know Kenny Gamble, Huff and Gamble, and 16 other independent record executives were charged on a variety of financial irregularities stemming from a government investigation of payola in the record industry. Now, when it comes to Nat Turnipole's indictment, his indictment says that he was selling records at less than wholesale in many parts of the country, on the condition that said merchandisers would make payment in United States currency and in goods and services including automobiles, household appliances, and sporting goods. Plus, he committed wire fraud and conspired to cheat the IRS. And they had found out that he owed Jackie over $1 million in royalties. After that, things were kind of going good for Jackie around that time. Things was looking up for Jackie. He was 41 years old. He was about to do his own special on TV. He was about to get out of his deal with Nat Turnipole and Brunswick Records and sign to a new record label. Him and his girlfriend Lynn they had got married, but Lynn didn't know that he was married at the time. But Jackie and Lynn had just bought some land in Georgia because he was about to build a kennel because he loved dogs and everything. Plus, he had stopped drinking and doing drugs, and his health was good. But then on September 29th, 1975, Jackie was on stage singing his hit song Lonely Teardrops for Dick Clark's Good Old Rock and Roll Review at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, right? And all of a sudden, he just passed out on stage. And everybody in the crowd thought it was just a part of his stage act, but that's when singer Cornell Gunner of the group called the Coasters knew something was wrong, because Jackie hit his head hard on the floor. They say he hit his head on a piece of equipment and on the floor, and Cornell Gunner rushed out and tried to revive him. So they rushed Jackie to the hospital where he was stabilized, but by the lack of oxygen to his brain, it had caused him to slip into a coma. He had suffered a massive heart attack, and when he fell on stage, he hit his head real hard. And he ended up in a coma for 3 months. And when he finally came out of that coma, he was wheelchair bound with limited motor functions because he had real bad brain damage. Wow. And the only way he could communicate was with sounds and by blinking his eyes. But most of the time he would just look up staring in space. And it's just sad because his girlfriend Lynn at the time wanted to take care of him, but Harleen Harris was still his wife, and she prevented her from taking care of him. Lynn and Jackie had actually got married, but come to find out, Jackie was still legally married to Harleen Harris. So that was a big problem. And for 6 months, Jackie had no legal guardian or anyone to handle his medical affairs until they got it straight through the court systems. Then, a bunch of allegations came out about how he was being mistreated at the nursing home he was at. First off, when he was still comatose in the coma, it was reported that he had 2 black eyes and a broken nose. They were saying his oxygen tank had malfunctioned. He had fell out of a chair. They were giving him the wrong medical treatment. He was left unattended. His wrist was broke. They would sit him in a chair close to the wall, and he would bang his head during convulsions. A heat lamp had fell on him and burned him and everything. Wow. He was basically a vegetable, y'all. Now, some say and believe that Jackie's heart attack could have been caused by his manager and label president Nat Turnerpool, because 3 months before his heart attack or whatever, Jackie was supposed to be testifying in that payola case against Nat Turnerpool. Because by the time the U.S. attorney came to interview Jackie about his manager Nat Turnerpool, Jackie was in a coma and couldn't talk. And you know what? Nat Turnerpool beat that case because no one testified to tell what he was really doing behind the scenes. And it was reported that Nat Turnerpool had $1 million insurance policy on Jackie too, and he was just waiting for him to die. But you know, his ex, Harleen Harris, ended up winning in court to be his legal guardian because her and Jackie never divorced. And his hospital bills just kept stacking up higher and higher, man. But you know, his good friend, Elvis Presley, sent him $30,000 to help with his medical bills. The R&B group called the Spinners, they did a benefit concert for him and raised over $60,000 for him. Barry White sent $10,000 to him. Bobby Womack had did a benefit concert, and many more of his good friends helped out. But then, in 1977, more bad news would come Jackie's way when his daughter, Sandra Wilson, died at the age of 24 of an apparent heart attack. So for years, Jackie was still, he would face a bunch of other problems while he was in the nursing home, like owing the IRS over $300,000 because his estate didn't have any money. Then he ended up getting sicker and sicker and couldn't hold down any food. And on January 21st, 1984, Jackie Wilson died from complications of pneumonia. Now, his girlfriend Lynn said he died from strangulation. That's what she said. He died from strangulation. And you know, the sad part is he didn't even have a headstone. His grave was marked only by a board with his name on it because his estate didn't have any money. Wow, man, this is sad, man. But you know, years later, a DJ in Orlando, Florida named Jack the Rapper Gibson, he did a donation fund and he had raised over $18,000 to get him a really nice tombstone. So that was nice of him to do that. Now, in 1985, a year after Jackie's death, the R&B group called the Commodores recorded the song Night Shift in memory of Jackie Wilson and Marvin Gaye, who both died that year in 1984. In December 1986, almost 3 years after Jackie's death, his debut song called Reet Petite hit #1 in the UK for 4 weeks, selling over 700,000 copies, becoming that year's UK Christmas #1, 29 years after its chart debut. Wow, that's crazy. In 1987, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1988, his eldest daughter, Jacqueline Wilson, who was 37 years old, was killed in a drug-related incident in Highland Park, Michigan. And you know the story with that incident, she was just standing outside in front of the store, and 2 guys who had some problems over some drugs and money just started shooting at each other, and she got shot in her back during the shootout. She was an innocent victim. Wow. Sad, man. Wow. Now, in 1999, Jackie's song Higher and Higher and Lonely Teardrops were inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. In 2003, he was honored with the Rhythm and Blues Foundation Legacy Tribute Award. In 2005, he was voted into the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame. In 2013, he was inducted into the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. In 2019, he was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You know, there was also talk about a movie being made about his life. And I know there's a documentary out called The Last Teardrop, which is about the journey of his son, Bobby Wilson. Bobby Wilson found out that he was his son years later, and his story definitely need to be told too, what he went through. But you know, make sure y'all support that documentary called The Last Teardrop, which is about Bobby Wilson and Jackie Wilson's life. But you know, his son though, Bobby Wilson, looks and dances just like him. So if they ever do a biopic on Jackie, his son should definitely get that lead role. But you know, Jackie Wilson, man, 49 years old, y'all. He was only 49 years old. Wow, that's young. Rest in peace, the legend, Mr. Excitement, Jackie Wilson.